All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I am now joined by Graham Coffey, Dawg out west. Is it out west? Because you're in Colorado. You're really like the Midwest. I feel like it's a misnomer.
Whoa. All right, so first of all, I live in Southwest Colorado, so I'm really in like the Four Corners. I live in Durango, so I'm like 6.5 hours from Denver. So I mean, like maybe you can call Denver the Midwest because it is a stone's throw from Nebraska and Kansas, but I'm gonna call myself a Westerner. You know, I'm not that far from the Central Time Zone, or I'm sorry, from the Western Pacific Time Zone. So,
well, I mean, you're just a buff. Like the Colorado Buffaloes making the Pac-12 jump. Now everyone in Colorado thinks because they're Pac-12 school. When I think of the Pacific Ocean, I think of Boulder, Colorado. But
well, in fairness, I don't think much of anyone in Colorado thinks about the Buffs that much these days,
Yikes.
Sadly. So, yeah, I mean, I'll say that my experience living here for 5 years now is that you see a lot more like Colorado State memorabilia, and, I think that's because Boulder has become very transplant sort of oriented, and also just a lot of the kids that are coming to Colorado are not natives of Colorado and maybe not staying in Colorado after graduation. So it is an interesting dynamic.
I think you're underplaying the value of Jay Norvell making the flip from Nevada to Colorado State. That nothing energizes the fan base like the man who developed Carson Strong.
That's true. Well, yeah,
I'm a big Jay Norvell guy. That's not even tongue in cheek. He's gonna be
no.
good.
I like Jay Norvell. He's great, and I like Carson Strong too. He was really good. Kind of 10 p.m. time slot entertainment for college football last year. I also think if you have a fan base that can stay enthusiastic and engaged through Steve Adazio, then nothing can kill them, right?
Guys being dudes.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's all I'll ever think about with him is, does he have another job? What is he doing now? Did he get another job or is he out?
I'm sure he's like an NFL, position coach assistant or something.
The Jeremy Pruitt route.
That's just totally a guess, but anybody that's like in the Urban Meyer inner sanctum kind of always. Oh, so he's the OL coach at Texas A&M now.
Is he really?
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's kind of wild. I guess a lot of 5-star recruits are going to get yelled at and maybe slightly discriminated against. That's interesting.
Yikes. Walter Nolan, come on home. Well, Graham, I wanted to talk a little SEC East as long as the Eastern Division still exists because the ACC is like, we're podding ahead.
I would love to pod.
I love to pod. I have a pod. You have a pod. Podding is the future. Not only are we killing radio, but we're also killing divisions in college football. I'm excited for this. I think it's a long time coming. I don't think it's been necessary. I will say one of the things I've noticed is like, so national folks or just like the people who are no longer attached to like a team and they cover the team cover college football objectively. One of their blind spots is how they talk about what's good for TV and what like is good for the sport. And I think they miss a lot of things. So one of the things I think they miss, and I don't even think it's their fault, it's just when you leave that just kind of inner sanctum and just become the national objective, study everything from afar, like you just miss certain things. And one of the things they miss is like, oh, it's great that we get to, I'm not going to shout out who it was, but people that I respect that I was listening to today, they were talking about the ACC flipping to this, and it looks like it's coming in 2023, which is pretty amazing that this is happening this fast because most things in college football just don't really, you can't get everybody on the same page that quickly by and large. But it seems like it's a universally approved thing. But one of the hosts said was, well, this is great because most college football fans want to play everybody, and they don't like that they don't get to play everybody, and they want more diversity in their schedule. And I was like, well, that's not true. Like, that's not a thing. Yeah. So that's just not reality. If you talk to a Tennessee fan, they're not like, man, I would love to, like, even with our struggles with Bama and Florida and just the issues there year over year, it's not like we're chomping at the bit to sub them out for more Ole Miss games. Like, that's not so, like, that is a cool thing that we should have more diversity in the calendar, but the more diversity should come with cutting out the pay for play games, like cutting out the Akron games, the Army games. But the idea that college football fans and these fans of these universities and Georgia fans, like, they don't want to get, like, if it means removing some rivalries that they have every year just for more diversity in the calendar, I would say that more Georgia fans would be upset about losing somebody like Auburn or Tennessee yearly for just more diversity in their calendar. So I get the pod stuff, and I think it's ultimately a good idea, but I would look more towards the 9 conference game slate and then just maybe 3, sometimes even 2. But preserving the rivalries is like one of the last things that we have that makes us that just is
differentiates from the NFL.
Yes. Yeah. And when you move that, like, I can understand why it makes more sense, but I think you're completely misunderstanding what college football fans actually want, which is the rivalries on Saturdays. And if you only do Tennessee, Georgia once every 4 years or whatever, that's not good for the sport, and it's not good for the fans. They don't want that.
So I agree with that to a certain extent. I think that, like, I agree with you that I don't think fan bases want to switch those core traditional rivals for, you know, an extra trip to Oxford every decade or whatever. But I do think that maybe they would like to switch out Vanderbilt for an extra trip to Oxford every decade, or you know, pick whatever kind of lower tier team in the division that they play every year, right? I think where this is going to be interesting is kind of these pods will get built based on, you know, yes, some sort of historical precedent in terms of rivalry, but probably also based on trying to balance out who's good now. And that's going to change, right? Like, that's very fluid in college football, especially in the SEC. If pods had gotten built 2 years ago, how would we have looked at Arkansas then versus how we might place them now? So I think that part is a little sketchy, which honestly makes me feel like maybe the model that's better is just you have protected rivals, and every year a group or the commissioner's office or someone on a committee kind of builds out your conference schedule in a similar way that the NFL does, but you still have your protected rivals. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, if the SEC is going to be 16 teams, then you have to do pods, and it is going to be 16 teams. Georgia has kind of famously still never played at Texas A&M, right? And they've been in the league for over a decade now. So I do think it's good as a fan. I think it's interesting. I struggle a little bit with the idea of, like, eliminating some of the paycheck games, not from an entertainment standpoint, but mostly because I think a lot of schools that play college football only can survive as college football schools with those paycheck games.
But why can't we just pay them? Like, that's the other thing. Is like,
well, maybe they should. Yeah, maybe there's a pool, and, you know, I mean, I do think we are careening headlong into a separation within the FBS, even
which
further.
I am absolutely here for. Like, this is
I'm fine with it. Yeah, it's already kind of happened on its own, right? Cincinnati did go to the playoff last year, but
they also couldn't beat Bama and Georgia in back-to-back games. Like, that's not a feasible proposition. True. So it's like, yeah, it's great, but they're still playing a different sport by and large. And the Cincinnati
and NIL is going to just separate that more and more, right?
Interesting. See, I don't think it's NIL that separates it more. I think it's the transfer portal that separates that more. Where
that's a
the
good
bigger
point.
Programs have to be, like, they can just pick off the programs like the Eastern Michigans or the Middle Tennessee States. Like, oh, this running back that you developed for 3 years, we're pulling you to the University of Tennessee. We're giving you an upgrade for one final year. NIL, if you have a big booster.
But NIL is driving the transfer portal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if Jahmyr Gibbs is making that move based on NIL money. Like, I don't know if Eli Rick. I mean, he's not a good one because he's going to get NIL money from either where. I think it's a case-by-case basis, but I would say where I'm sitting right now and the folks that I've talked to, it seems like the bigger issue for Group of Five coaches is placating their star players and being worried about becoming a farm system for the big boys versus the NIL dollars, where the haves have always had the money and the haves have always not had the money. But what they have not been able to do is talk to players on other teams and recruit and say, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to come here. Like, it's just, I think the transfer portal is the biggest, the biggest issue, the biggest iceberg for college football over the foreseeable future, because I just don't think there's a good way of fixing that. NIL, I'm not as concerned about it. I think it's a long time coming out. I just don't feel bad about the NCAA with NIL whatsoever. No. But I also, the transfer window should have been like immediate thing. Like the fact that we did not have a transfer window just outlined and ready to go when we did this just screwed over a bunch of coaches. And I know people are not going to shed a lot of tears for millionaire coaches, but their job sucks right now. And
it does suck.
And that's just the reality. So it's like that the Matt Lukes of the world. You're going to just see more guys try and win young and then get out. And then they're like, maybe I'll take a break and then I'll come back later. But you're going to see more churn on the college football coaching carousel, I think, than ever before.
I agree with that. And I think we have to stop that to an extent. I don't agree with how the NCAA, I'm sure, is going to try and go about, regulating the transfer portal and some of this NIL stuff, but I do agree that it needs to be regulated, and there needs to be schedules. There needs to be some deadlines. I'm all for everyone getting their money, right? But I also think that the thing that I love about college football is just the regionalism. Yeah, yeah, at Jerry World. But I enjoy the regionalism of college football. I enjoy the diversity of different fan bases and different schools, and just kind of the bigger pot of teams to be interested in than what you get from a pro league. And so, if we get to a point where the tampering of like calling up a kid that isn't in the portal and saying, come on down for X amount of money, like, we got to figure that out a little bit, right? There needs to be a way to kind of allow the sport to keep some of its diversity in terms of which teams are interesting and which aren't, and interesting teams are only interesting if they have talent. So, it's like I've always been a nerd for those kind of random teams that popped up and were really good, like the Arizona teams of the early 90s with the Desert Swarm defense and Brewski and like that big stable of running backs. Like, that's always been a fascinating group to me, you know what I mean? And so I don't want college football to lose like the 2007 West Virginias, where maybe that team doesn't have a legit shot at winning a national title going through the gamut of a playoff, but
that's not what college football is about. It's not about,
I still want to see them there. Yeah, exactly, totally. And I think that what you just said right there, like, it's not just about winning national titles, and it's not just about making or not making a playoff. And the problem is that I think NCAA football, college football, has allowed a bunch of people who really kind of enjoy a pro sports model more than a college sports model to come in and determine their model. And I argue with my buddy Josh on our show about this all the time. We've had like screaming matches over it, but how many regular season college basketball games does the average fan watch versus the amount of interest they have in the NCAA tournament? And I think where we are at the playoff right now, you can still say that the regular season matters more than it does in any other sport, but we're close to kind of tipping past that, to where that 3:30 CBS game where it's tied with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter and the whole stadium feels like the entire world is on the line. We're close to losing that. Well, we're going to lose the CBS 3:30 game either way, but I don't want to lose that, because I think not just as a fan, but also as someone that's a content creator, I think I might struggle to keep the same amount of like passion and interest in that content creation as I do now, because the stakes just aren't quite as high, right?
Well, their hope is it's like the NFL, where the NFL regular season numbers are fine, and people are just as interested in the playoffs as the regular season in the NFL. And I think there is a point, like, it's still football will always be king because it's appointment television. There's still if they were expanding the regular season into like 18, 19 games or something, and they were really adding more to the calendar, I think that would be more of an issue because part of the appeal is that there's only so many Saturdays. Football season just comes and goes so quickly. You blink and Tennessee just scored again on South Carolina. Like it's one of those things that if you just look away for 1 second, there's another one. No,
I mean, I'm with you, but at the same time, like, I love the part of college football where, maybe a close loss to a fellow top 5, top 10 team won't ruin your season. One of them won't, but I love the fact that, like, buddy, if you're Ohio State and you go to Iowa and you get that ass beat by 35 points, like, that's it. You know, because you don't deserve to win a national title at that point, in my personal opinion. And I think we'll kind of lose that. Like, I see, truthfully, to kind of distill this down, I think that all of the stuff that's happened with college football postseason conversation over the last 2 to 3 years has been the product of a Bama fatigue problem, and that college football administrators are creating a permanent solution to an impermanent problem.
Yeah.
And that eventually, yes, it feels like they've been there forever, and they have in many ways, but eventually everything cycles out. And
I just love the idea that they think that a lot of
expanding the playoff is going to solve that
or solve attendance problems. It's like it's just as Graham, we need to be in the room. Like, I would love to be in the room for these meetings because
so much.
I would love to just hear their back and forth and hear where everybody's coming from. Like, I would just be so curious about it because I just think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. Like, they should actually have at least 3 super fans, 3 season ticket holders in the room at all times.
I'm with you. I think it'd be awesome.
I think it would just add a layer of nuance that they just don't have. Like, they need that perspective, and I think there is some kind of like, oh, it's all about the playoff, it's about playoff revenue. We would rather, I think they see it as like, oh, if we can talk about this thing every single week, it's never going anywhere. Like, we can have every broadcast be built around, oh, they have to win this game because if they only win by this, then that affects their playoff chances by this. Like, it's not nearly as fun. Like, it's just one of those things where they're creating stakes that no one's asking for. It's like There was no college football fan in 2004 that were like, you know what this sport's missing? Some more stakes. And us looking towards January. You weren't looking towards January. The point should be savor September, savor October, savor November. I love the NFL, but I have the NFL for that other thing. That's not why I like college football, and that's not why the majority of college football fans like the sport. When we're watching another touchdown being scored by Tennessee against South Carolina, we're not thinking like, oh, could we make the college football playoff? No, we're enjoying that moment. Like, no, it's just fun. Like, I'm just enjoying what's happening. I'm not thinking about what comes in January and like who's going to get in and who's going to get out. And that's how most college football fans are. But if you ask these people who are in these rooms making these decisions, it seems like there's a complete misunderstanding about what people actually want. It's like, hey, if you're going to get, like, the latest example is, hey, attendance numbers are continuing to decline year over year. What if we just got rid of even more rivalries? What if we throw more, just like, here's this team you're going to play once every 4 years, and make it more robotic and more just like...
Just homogenize things even further. Yeah.
Like, just talk to, like, 8 fans around the SEC and just see what their response is. Then you're like, oh, maybe we didn't read the room correctly. Let's reevaluate. But it's just, they don't do that. And I think the worst part too is just that, like, I want bowl season gone. I want to cut it. I want to punt it into the sun. It hurts me. I grew up on bowl season. I love doing my bowl predictions with my family. I love it. I love having college football on at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday.
Yes.
But it's over. Like, once the playoff expanded it to 4, and once we decided the playoff was more important than the bowl season, the opt-outs were coming, and that was just, like, you can't get that back. So if we just
that's fine.
Yeah.
It's still a college football game. Yeah, it's fine. I'm cool with it. And I think that when you talk about, like the biggest kind of alarm bell for me when I listen to some of the national discourse on this issue is when someone's like, I want to do this because it'll create more meaningful games. And that immediately tells me you don't understand college football.
Right.
Because if you understood college, I had a conversation with Dan Wetzel at Yahoo. He came on our pod last year, and he was like, how great would it be if the Egg Bowl was for a college football playoff spot? And I was like, Dan, do you realize that people are ready to like cut one another in the parking lot of the Egg Bowl when it's 4-8 versus 5-7?
Yep.
Like that. If you understand college football, you understand that every single game has emotional implications. It has job security implications. It has recruiting implications. It has fan
Tennessee
pride.
losing to Vanderbilt, you're getting fired. Like, that's just how it goes.
Totally. And that's pretty meaningful no matter whether or not there's a playoff spot on the line. So, yeah. And I mean, I think especially as we kind of go through the NIL era with recruiting and all of that, it's like, no. Don't be mistaken that it's just going to be money, right? Like, there might be a couple instances where that is true, but the vast majority of blue chip prospects still are making decisions based off of, is this program on the rise? Is it on the fall? Who's going to be there? Who's
it's
not?
Good that
all
you said that, because this can lead us into the Arch Nico thing, where it's like some of the people who just do not they really want to hate Tennessee, and I understand. Like, we're an everything school, number one in baseball.
Oh man, that is so rich.
I need to hold on. I'm making a note that you just spit out your at the 21:40 mark there. That was my goal.
I mean, whenever if you can get Rick Barnes to coach you in the first week of the NCAA tournament, you got to do it, right?
That's enough. So, we actually got the Dogs in town this weekend, so I'm excited to I don't know. I don't know what the point differential will be. At least 30-11, somewhere around there, but we'll see.
If Georgia's able to kind of keep, and Georgia's probably the second best team in the East this year.
Yeah.
At least standings wise, they definitely are, but I think if Georgia was able to win one game, everyone would be ecstatic. But I think maybe more realistic is let's keep one close and get to the 8th and 9th and feel like anything can happen. And that's a compliment to you guys.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I do wonder what will happen in the postseason with that team.
I don't want to be number one. Like, there has not been a number one team that went in over 20 years or something. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's always that, when Georgia was in the College World Series in 2007, I was a freshman.
Gordon Beckham.
Gordon Beckham, the legend,
Yeah.
I knew the guys that rented the house in right field, so we would watch a lot of games out there.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a blast. No, it was one of my favorite experiences as a college student. But that team played Miami in the College World Series in the first game, and Miami was kind of that juggernaut that had lost very few games all year, and they beat them, and Miami did not make it to the final of the College World Series.
It's hard, man. It's hard to make it through. But
it's a crapshoot.
It is a crapshoot. And the one thing I was going to say about Nico and Arch is that, a lot of people are making the jokes because we still don't know if Nico is the $8 million guy. That will never come out publicly. That will never be known.
Come on.
Well, we don't know, Graham. We don't know who that.
It's okay. It's legal. It's okay. Let's just. All right. Well, for the purposes of this conversation, can we?
No, we can
work under the hypothesis that
you can order the
hypothesis.
hypothesis. Yes, you can do that.
Okay.
You can hypothesize that Nico is the $8 million guy.
Cool.
You can hypothesize that. But Nico is part of what he talked about. The reason that he chose Heupel was the offense. He's seen the stats for Dylan Gabriel at UCF. He's seen what Drew Lock did at Missouri. There is if this was still Pruitt and Spire Sports offering $8 million to replicate what Jarrett Garantano was doing for 2 years, he's not saying yes. He's not in the conversation. So I think there's
maybe
this weird.
Depends on. I think probably not, but maybe in rare, depending on one's personal circumstances and what other bids are in the marketplace. Maybe $8 million does do it, but I'm
but
sorry.
it's still the
Continue.
excitement that, like, oh, he can just turn Hendon Hooker, who we didn't know was a downfield guy whatsoever because of what we saw at Virginia Tech, and he was a Pruitt guy in January and was just kind of like a holdover, and he kind of got screwed by the coaching change, and he sticks it out, and he and Joe are super close, and Joe Milton stayed on board to be the backup because that's even harder to do. Like, y'all have been able to do it down in Athens, but that's a new thing with the portal is you don't know if someone like Harrison Bailey left late last season. We were down to like a walk-on.
Where did he land?
UNLV.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see like what this looks like because Nico is putting together a great staff, but for Arch, there's a completely different sell. Because Nico can just be like, I can be an instant Heisman guy in Heupel's offense. Like, I'm going to put up bonkers numbers like this. Look at what he's done with Hendon Hooker, who is just an all-time great leader, and we love Hendon up here. But it's still just like the upside with Nico is pretty wild. Like, it's a lot to think about. It's a program changer. Like, Nico is a program changer for the Heupel era. But yes.
So I've said this on Twitter. You might have seen me say it and just avoided because you're a good person. But I think as an observer of Georgia and just the SEC and college football in general, I think the floor is so high on Heupel's offense for quarterbacks that I don't know that it really does change. From a perception standpoint, yes, okay, having a 5-star quarterback on campus is always a great thing. It always helps recruiting, yada, yada, yada. But, like, on field, does it really change Tennessee's outlook in terms of how many games do I think they win with him that they wouldn't without him?
Well, I think it's the whole...
Not much, honestly.
Well, it's the Francis Maualaga, or whatever his last name, the offensive tackle out of IMG, and him going after him. And Carnell Tate, who looks like he's on the way, and it's the whole it's getting everybody else like it's who he brings in with him.
Okay, and I agree, but the skill positions are never going to be a problem in that offense, right? It is, if Tennessee was going out and signing 5-star defensive ends and we got 4-star
Caleb Herring, best player in the state of Tennessee.
Nice, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, if Tennessee was able to go out and spend money to build, and this is a multi-year process, but to go out and spend money to build up their line of scrimmage, something akin to what Georgia and Alabama have done, that would terrify me if I was a Georgia fan or an Alabama fan, right?
Well, I think that's Tennessee's hope, right, is that Nico can flip those defensive linemen. Like, if Nico's in the building and if you're a defensive edge guy and you're like, if I wasn't going to consider Tennessee, but Roddy Gardner being on staff here should help, and that was one of the thoughts.
Overrated.
Okay, that's enough.
We had him for a long time.
We also had Lee Martinez, and he's our.
But Gardner was there with the early Kirby Smart era.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Trey Scott, Rodney Gardner.
I'm more worried about just having enough corners. Like, the spring ball situation was dire in the cornerback situation. And I'm also worried about the off the line. Like, the tackle spots are a huge question mark.
That's my big thing for you guys, right? Because, as explosive and good as that Tennessee offense was last year and just kind of as apt as they are to take advantage of somebody that's just moving a little slow pre-snap or, just isn't quite mentally there or is a little bit out of position. The antidote is good defensive line play. And granted, you're not going to run into 2021 Georgia's defensive line.
I was going to say, Kentucky tried to do that too, but Kentucky didn't have an answer for that. Like, they just
correct.
If you get the ball out quick, it doesn't really matter in some instances. But if you want to run, like, you can't. I wish we could play Missouri's defense and their defensive line week to week because that was fun. But most defensive lines in the SEC are not like that.
Yeah, and I guess my point is, like, I think that Tennessee kind of is on that trajectory to be in like a 9-win team in the regular season, which is great and definitely a step up from where they've been for a lot of the last decade or so. But it's also
need Nico Arch. We need Nico and Arch, and the Arch
that would be pretty.
That would just be incredible.
An Arch going to Knoxville, with his last name in a Georgia uniform to play the other 5-star quarterback.
Yes.
Kind of the guy. It's like, which one is the guy? It's kind of a situation that we really maybe haven't seen totally in the SEC since like the Tebow Stafford Mallet year. Remember that? Back in 07?
I love that you threw
or
Mallet
06.
in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was, yeah. Does anyone have a Scantron?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wasn't he did he hurt himself on a moped? Was it a scooter or a moped where he broke his like ankle? What was that? He fell off something.
I don't remember. I mean, I know his coach
Ryan Mallett fell off either a
motorcycle.
moped or hold on. Am I misremembering that? Mallett, scooter.
Usually, if it's a scooter incident, it's UGA related.
Yeah.
And there's an arrest involved.
Body cam, cross center line vehicle. It doesn't matter. There was something else with him, and I can't remember what it was. Or maybe he was just riding around on a scooter a bunch with the boot. I don't know.
I think that's what it was. I think he used to like cruise around campus on a
maybe
scooter.
That's what it was.
Like,
okay, I just have
possibly
this.
shirtless.
I have this very distinct memory of Ryan Mallett on a scooter with his leg like in a thing. So I don't know. Now I got to do a whole rabbit hole. Thanks a lot, Graham. That's my evening.
problem. Yeah, well, anytime you can, I'm here for that. Yeah, so I guess with the SEC East this year, like, I think that Tennessee, it's kind of that Tennessee-Kentucky battle again, but I think
apparently the bookers like Florida. Florida has higher SEC odds than Tennessee and Kentucky.
Which, with that, like, I'm always like, is there something? I don't know. But I think, I've been talking about this online lately a lot. There is an epidemic. An epidemic. I know that's a very dramatic word, but I am using it.
I'm ready. I don't know where you're going with this.
When it comes to preseason prognostication and talking about college football this time of year and throughout the summer, there is an epidemic.
You're really going at South Carolina fans here.
Yes, I am actually. But yeah, it's a massive issue. The overvaluing of quarterback / wide receiver play and the undervaluing of line of scrimmage / defensive play is super dramatic. And that's how, we end up with some of the, PFF writing articles of can South Carolina win the SEC East and all of that.
Here's the answer.
They can't.
No, they cannot.
And it's totally unfair to Shane Beamer, who is doing a really good job there and is a culture fit, which is the first box I think you should check on any coaching search, much like Heupel is in Knoxville. But, yeah, like any South Carolina coach that has a 7-win season is doing a fantastic job. Fantastic job. And I'm sorry, but Spencer
Have
Rattler.
You seen their schedule? Like, there's just no path. There's
there's not. And it's also like, even if Spencer Rattler comes to South Carolina and turns out to be what we thought he was going to be out of high school, he still needs time to throw the football. The tight end that came in, I'm sorry, like
Sternberger or whatever.
Yeah, out of Oklahoma, but like in the SEC,
he's like number 4 on the depth chart at Georgia right now.
Right, exactly. And it's like, I mean, this maybe even speaks more to how good Brock Bowers was last year, but like in the SEC, you have to be a really, really good tight end to kind of get any space or separation, because the athletes at outside linebacker and inside linebacker and safety in the SEC are a totally different level than what you're seeing in
unless
any
you're
other
playing
conference.
Tennessee and our linebackers with Beasley and Banks.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Even Toto gets burned all the time at Alabama.
We don't say his name on this podcast anymore.
I'm sorry. That guy.
My
HD.
uncles cannot. They were the Toa one stung, man. I mean, everybody leaving was tough, but Toa.
I mean, Jermaine Burton to Alabama after, like, emotionally as a fan, like sitting there in the stadium, like watching him have like a couple. Georgia goes down and he catches a pass on the first play off of the kickoff that like felt really big from a momentum standpoint. Then he does a double move that gets a pass interference call, and then 2 plays later is the A.D. Mitchell touchdown on the offsides. Like, that was kind of the game in a lot of ways, and all of a sudden it's like now he's posting on Twitter. Dude, there's a picture of him on Twitter receiving an SEC championship ring from Nick Saban at like on the A at Alabama's spring game in the rain, and I'm like, that's odd, you know. Yeah, that's really strange. Like, you know, and he's talking about like, I think he tweeted something about like, yeah, like back to back, we're going back to back, and it's like, well, no, like you might be, but yeah, it's totally So I don't understand it. It is weird. Emotionally,
can I read you South Carolina's schedule real quick, by the way?
Please.
Just so, like, South Carolina fans, we want, like, look, did Shane Beamer deserve to go co-coach to the Newcomer of the Year award, the Spurrier Award, Heupel, after just what happened in Knoxville? Absolutely not. Is that Shane Beamer's fault? Absolutely not. That being said, this schedule for South Carolina, they go to Arkansas in week 2. They get Georgia at home in week 3. So then you have Charlotte. So we're looking at 2-2. SC State 3-2. Then they go to Kentucky. A&M at home the following week. Like the back-to-back of those two physical teams, like they're losing both those games. And then you go to Florida.
I don't know. I'm not in on A&M, but yeah.
Oh, you're not in on them over South Carolina.
I just don't trust. I think like maybe in 2 years, you know, talk to me in 2023. But
okay. Well,
I think they're going to lose a game like that somewhere along the way, so it might as well be South Carolina. But
well, let's just give them that. Okay. Then you still have Florida. Their last 3 games is Florida on the road, Tennessee at home, and then Clemson on the road.
And Florida will probably have some things figured out by that point. Yeah.
I'm going to Columbia for that South Carolina. I need it in my bones. I need the 56-7 in Columbia.
Have you been to Columbia?
I have not. No.
Oh, buddy. It's like my experience in Columbia going back to being a kid, because I grew up in North Carolina, so that was like the closest Georgia game every year was when they played in Columbia. Rabid fan base before games. They will hurl expletives and different slurs and things at you. And then like as soon as you go up by 14 in the second quarter, everybody's really nice. They offer you fried chicken, and it's all good. But you never want to lose a game in there, because when that fan base starts believing that they're good, just because that's a kind of a generational situation for them, it's rough, man. It gets wild, it gets aggressive, it gets kind of crazy, and that's the most frightened I've ever been coming out of a stadium was after the 2010 Georgia South Carolina game.
Interesting. Yeah, no, the only one I have circled this year is Florida. Like, if they don't beat Florida this year, then I don't know when it's coming. Like, it's just Florida dictates everything with Tennessee season this
That's
fall.
Very true. What is your thoughts on Florida? Because you just mentioned the odds thing. Like, I'm kind of personally like that's sort of what spurred my comment about this epidemic of overvaluing quarterback play. But it seems like everyone's projecting Anthony Richardson to be a possible top 10 NFL draft pick next year. And Lord knows he's an extremely physically talented athlete, but doing the film breakdown preview stuff that we do on our show before the Georgia-Florida game last year, it was very clear, like, he just isn't quite there yet with how he gets through his reads, and that LSU secondary was just really bad, and so
they also really need Justin Shorter to be the guy. Like, Shorter, at this point, he's got to be a number one.
Is it too late?
I mean, if it is, then they're in trouble. Like,
well, Richardson, even if he is the number one option, I think if Justin Shorter is your number one option, unless something dramatically changes with what we know about him, that you're in big trouble.
Yeah. I don't know. Florida, and they're just a wild card. I don't know. Florida, Knoxville.
I think Utah is going to wax them.
Interesting.
Week 1 in Gainesville.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably have Florida there, but I think it'll be close.
You think Florida's going to beat Utah?
At home, yeah. I think so.
I just think Utah,
I like Utah. Kyle Winningham, death taxes, Utah being undervalued in the Pac-12.
Yes. Cam
You're
Rising.
in Pac-12 country. You hear all the Utah chatter.
Dude, I'm very close to Utah. Yeah. Literally a stone's throw away.
Yeah.
Yes, but I also think, like, Utah's built on the line of scrimmage to play with an SEC team in a way that maybe your average Pac-12 team isn't. But, we've got Oregon and Utah coming east for opening weekend games. That'll be kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Graham, how do the good folks keep up with everything going on with the show, the Dawg Sports, Dog Out West, all kinds of dogs all over the place? What can the good folks look out for this week?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dog Out West. Dog is obviously spelled the proper way with an A and a W.
Right.
Yes, we have a show on YouTube where we break down film and scheme analysis, X's and O's. Also give plenty of hot takes and all of that fun stuff. That is called Dawg Sports Live. Please find us on YouTube, subscribe. There's a good in-depth 108 play spring game breakdown up there right now. If you're a Georgia fan finding this and want to dig a little deeper into the fourth team defensive tackle, go and check it out.
Absolutely. I wish we could do that with Tennessee, but we played at Haslam Field in the spring because Knoxville was getting Nealon was getting worked on. So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
okay.
It was
interesting.
It was a little. I wouldn't call it a spring game. It was a weird practice, is what I would call it. Graham Coffey, thank you as always, and I'll talk to you soon.